Welcome to Humans Are Creative podcast, episode 3. I am Dylan Leslie Rowe, and today we have TJ Harrop in the house.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good.
I know how you are. We've been talking for 5 minutes already.
Why don't you give us a quick summary of yourself, and then we can kind of dig a bit deeper, go back to the origins of your life and how you got through life. Go for it, mate. Tell us about yourself.
How I got survived this far. Into this old age of mine. My name is TJ. We've been through that. I'm currently working in the New South Wales government as the manager of the design system and a bunch of other similar products, which kind of alludes to what I do. I do a lot of design ops work. So I've been around design for a while. Started out as a developer, but I'll talk you through that. But quickly realized that my code quality left a lot to be desired, and that what I actually cared about was getting a product to exist. So have some development skills in there. I like to work with engineering, but I'm a designer and manage design systems and do design ops stuff.
Good man. Yeah, I mean, as a recruiter in recruiting the tech space, I've actually tried to code myself and have a few lessons here and there. I mean, I don't know how they do it. I mean, my mind doesn't work like that.
No, and it's you know what I don't get with it. It's the delayed sense of satisfaction that you don't get, or you do get. With coding, you've got to make something, and then when it gets to a point where you go, I've actually made that, you've got to think that's just the start. I've now got to go back over it a few times and make sure the whole thing works absolutely perfectly. I just don't have that.
I think it's the visual side of it that I can't grasp. I mean, I need to see that end visual product. And to be a back-end developer must be quite hard, but
each of their own.
That's it. So look, let's go right back to the beginning, TJ. Tell us about your life and where you grew up.
Yep. Grew up in South Manchester, which is actually just Stockport. It's its own place, but in a very sort of wasn't too difficult sort of area, if I'm very honest. And went to school, did the normal stuff, was a bit of an arse, not on purpose, just I don't know, enjoyed. In what way?
Yeah,
the same way I still am now, I think. Wasn't massive on academic stuff, but what I did do that I'd liked was techie stuff. So I was quite lucky, actually. What I didn't realize at the time was that I have ADHD, and that wasn't something that had really come out yet. It was around, but it wasn't around for me. The teachers hadn't realized it. And so I just sort of didn't really pay much attention in most of the topics I wasn't interested in. But what I did find was that I quite liked technology. So there's 3 different types of technology subject, and did a bit of the sort of usual woodworky stuff. But then what did happen that was, I think, maybe quite formative was there was a good technology teacher who knew that I was a bit of an arse, but knew that he'd come across kids like me before. He'd also been a big fan of my sister. I followed in my sister's footsteps at the high school I went to, and she was well behaved and intelligent and the rest of it. When I got there, I think they had big expectations for me, but maybe I didn't meet them. But this guy was, he'd helped out my sister. He was a good teacher. He was the guy that did product design. So he sort of took me to one side, and instead of me getting in trouble in classes I didn't like, I just went and did some of his, where I sort of learned to do technical drawings and design some products. Did some fabrication. What's that?
So important to have a teacher like that, and because
I
mean, without that kind of guidance, it can be difficult at school when you struggle. I mean, I've been in similar situations, and you kind of gravitate to a teacher that's there to kind of help you and bring you through.
Yeah, totally. And he wasn't actually my teacher. I didn't have him for any topics. That subject didn't run for the year that I was in. And it was only because it was do that or just be in trouble half the time that he sort of took me to one side, because I didn't want to be in trouble. I wasn't that kind of kid. I didn't want to set the school on fire. I was just a bit, I don't know, delinquent. But what happened, I mean, I remember when I went to get my GCSE results when I was 16, my sister took me there, and I'd managed to turn around in about 8 weeks from failing that topic completely to this guy sort of took me under his wing, showed me how to do stuff, and I think I got an E, or a D or something. It was like this thing that was like not great, but amazing for the fact it just turned it around in the last few weeks. Went to get my results and looked at the thing, and I was like, I bet I failed one. Looked straight at that one. I was like, yes, I got a D. And I went to my sister, I was like, got a D for tech. And she was like, right, trying to be polite, thinking, what on earth has we got off the rest of it? If this is the one he's really happy with, how's the rest of it gone?
Yeah.
The rest of it had gone fine. Like, but that was the one that I sort of turned around. So yeah, that was that. I guess that's where originally the design stuff came from.
Yeah. And what did you like to do outside of school? I mean, what was your kind of passions back then as a kid?
I almost don't like answering this question because outside of school, whilst I was in school, I started a web design company.
What age? Okay, what age are you here?
I think I started playing with HTML and PHP when I was probably 14 or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe started playing a bit younger. I don't know. But I know that by the time I was doing my GCSE in business studies, the dude who ran the IT company, there was like a little server room next to the business studies room at school. I'm very old, so not all classrooms had computers in them. I'm sure they do now. It was like only a couple. So the dude that ran the computer company that like looked after the servers and stuff, he actually paid me to make his website when I was still in school. So I think that was my first client. What was his name?
Amazing.
Tony Miller paid me to make his website. And I remember getting paid in the middle of class. Like I'd literally got into my business studies class a bit early, and he was like, "Oh, I've got your money," and he gave me like, I don't know, a couple $100 or something. Felt like loads at the time. And the surprise of my classmates who were like, "The hell's that for?" This is suspicious. Oh no, I did his website.
I mean, at that age, I'm like knowing about what kind of technologies and roles are out there now. I mean, at that age, I just didn't know. I think that was one of the problems for me at school, is not being guided in terms of what was out there and what was possible, kind of thing.
Or even,
for you to actually jumped on that at such a young age, I mean, that's quite impressive.
Yeah, I think I probably didn't know what roles were out there. I didn't even know how to turn it into a job. I just knew that I liked playing with making websites, and this dude said, "Oh, you can make mine." And obviously, trusted my abilities. What was good of him. But it's hard, isn't it? You can't expect teachers to know. You can't even expect teachers to know what the current roles are, let alone what's going to happen in the future. This is at a time where, what year would this have been? This would have been like 22, 23 years ago. Yeah, maybe a bit more. Teachers, I mean, UX wasn't even a phrase that the industry was using that much then. It was around, obviously. UX has been around since the 80s or something, or 90s. It's got some history before the modern version of it, but it wasn't really a phrase people were using. Can't really expect teachers to know. And I was thinking that the other day about teachers now, like they have to make this next generation of people ready for a world of automation. There's going to be, you can't tell someone that going to be a forklift driver is a career anymore. It might be a job for now, but before the end of these people who are in school now, before the end of their career, forklifts are going to be those little automated things that Amazon already have that just lift up these shelves and move them around.
I mean, it's an impossible task for the education service to actually keep up with technology and everything like that, and keep the kids educated, ready for the workforce these days. Because as soon as they come out, like you just said, it's just it probably won't be around. I mean, how do you even manage that?
I mean, how much has changed in the last 5 years? Let alone like if you got someone leaving school at 16, they've got it's 18 now, isn't it? But you've got like 40 years of work ahead of you that you've got to look out for before you can start winding down and get yourself a.
It's crazy because I mean, when we were at school, you kind of taught that, right, you do these courses, you learn this, you learn that, you choose a career path or a job that you want to. You're kind of expected to stay in that job. I don't think that. I mean, obviously now, I mean, people jump around and everyone has career changes, especially the last year. I mean, I got to the workforce. I thought, right, what else can I do? Because of COVID has affected my current job.
Yeah.
That's accelerated that even more. So these days, you could probably have 5 or 6 different jobs over your life career. I mean, I definitely have. I've had all sorts.
Yeah. Well, I've seen that. You're a DJ, weren't you?
Oh, part-time DJ here and there. I still
here and there. Did you get paid for it?
Still dabble here and there.
If you got paid for it, it was a profession.
I got paid for it. Yeah.
There you go.
That's true. On the side, part-time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know. It's and this is, I kind of bring this up sometimes because being someone who's like a mix of engineering and design, which shouldn't really be a mix. In other industries, that's not a mix. You
don't get that often.
Yeah. People who design boats, houses, and buildings and civil engineering, design and engineering are the same skill set. But as an industry, we kind of try and separate them almost, which is crazy for a couple of reasons. I mean, first of all, the engineering that we're talking about isn't beyond people who are in design. Designers in what we do have to be really smart. You have to be really smart to be a good UX designer or a good UI designer or a good service designer. And to do the very basics of coding, developers will hate this, to get started, it's not that hard to do a few lines and just work out how something works.
Yeah.
Like we're spoken about, doing back-end development is just not, it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
Doing full development so that you've created a full application is difficult. But no one's asking designers to do that. So we separate the jobs out. But it's possible for people to know more than one thing. It's possible for people to be a DJ and a recruiter and do both very well. Or it's possible for people to, I worked as all sorts. I worked as like a rep for tech companies that sold, I worked for Google selling Android phones, or promoting Android phones to people who worked in shops. And no one looks at that and goes, oh, hang on, those are separate careers. Because it's normal. It's normal to move careers. It's normal I know some really good UXers who've come through the GA system, and they've been in UX for like 6 or 7 years now. So they're actually pretty senior UXers. But before that, they were working in, I don't know, shops, bowling alleys, cinemas, whatever it was that they'd chosen to do whilst they worked out what to do. They were doing that. Yeah. And we sort of don't look at, we look at those as separate careers because they're completely different. But when there's similar careers, we kind of put them together a bit more.
Yeah. I completely agree. I'm just going. Let's go back to 14 years old. Talk me through this website that you built and what it was about.
Dread to think how it was made technically. What I do remember as well that I remember now, but I'd forgotten until I don't think about this very often. I was also making websites when I was in school because it was that time, the dawn of the funny internet, where there was all these sort of just joke websites, and I guess they still exist. 9gag's still a thing, and Reddit's getting quite popular. So I think they still exist, but although Reddit's much more than that, obviously. But there was I just made these websites. I made one called The Never Ending Story, where you could just submit the next part of the story. And I'm pretty sure I just copied that idea off someone, and I just wanted to see if I could make it in PHP. So I thought I'll give that a go, and made like, there was like the big famous Never Ending Story, and then there's like the Stockport version. So I just thought I'd give it a go. And
so everyone adds in their own part of the story, and it just continues.
Yeah. But it was just a bunch of like 14-year-olds with very little creativity going around. Yeah. Just putting swear words in because they could. I don't know how good it would be to look back.
At 14, I think I was down the park with a bottle of cider. with a load of my mates, not even thinking about that.
This is probably one of the things where it's like, it's worked out the same. Now, it wouldn't have made any difference by now. It's been long enough, but I guess I had to get a bit of a head start just from not being that cool. And like I had mates, but they also weren't really that cool. So we were all kind of doing the same stuff. That's unfair on them. I can say that about myself, not them. That's not fair.
So do you remember at the time, at 14 years old, what you wanted to do in life? Like what was in your head at the time?
Oh, I think it was just, if I make this website, then I can make another one, and then I make another one, and then make another one.
So you were just thinking in the now, really. You weren't thinking about what I want to do in life, where I want to go, what job. No,
not really. I think by the time I left school, finished the GCSEs, tried to go to college, mostly to appease my parents because they did the right thing, which is, hey, maybe just making websites for a couple of £100 isn't something that just magically turns into a career. Why don't you go and learn something? So I actually ended up doing an art course, which was not for me at all. But it was an art and media course. It was the closest you could get at the time to website stuff. Making it sound like I was in the dark ages. This was like
it's not that
20
yeah,
a while ago anyway. Wait, did I say it was 20 years ago when I was 14?
I think you did, yeah.
Actually, that's not far. I was like, that's not right. I'm not that old. And then I've just done the maths again. I'm like, no, you were. No, that was.
How old are you?
33.
33. Oh, you're not.
Yeah. So I'll go with that from now on, and then we can work backwards. Yeah, back then there weren't really there was no UX courses, for example.
Yeah.
There was IT courses, but I knew that wasn't me. I knew that I wasn't like a developer, like systems person. I wasn't that interested in that. My IT teacher at school had been really supportive, and I actually bunked off most of the IT classes in terms of doing the actual work you were meant to do for the IT class, because it was like doing Word documents and stuff. I just wasn't interested. I knew I was never going to like be interested in that or even do it.
Yeah.
So I'd actually ended up spending a lot of time practicing development during my IT classes.
Yeah, great.
And had this moment where it was like she was trying to work out whether she should give me a bollocking for not doing the work or congratulate me for doing something that's technically more difficult.
Yeah.
And it was this catch for her. She wasn't a teacher by background. She'd worked in the industry and then got into teaching from IT. And I think it was a catch for her, like this kid's done some really good stuff, but he's actually not done the work that he's being marked on, so he's going to fail this course.
Yeah.
Which is an unfortunate
That's
irony.
what's wrong about the education system, I think.
Yeah, I think she knew that because she was from industry. So she sort of tweaked everything I'd done and said, well, these are the units we've chosen, but if we choose these units instead, then you've actually got work from the stuff that you're not meant to have done that you can use for that. So I ended up passing.
During this time, so you're living with your family. Do you have any siblings at all? Or?
Yeah, I've got a sister who's a bit older.
Yeah. And so what were your parents like in terms of supporting your education or supporting your career? Were they supportive in terms of giving you advice of what you should do in life, or were they parents that kind of sat back and said, look, go for it and we trust you?
Kind of that one. Quite lucky, really. They don't never really I think it shows, doesn't it, when people have got those sorts of parents, because you just sort of try stuff. Pretty lucky. My dad is an engineer, and I think it was close enough to engineering that he kind of understood it. And was sort of like, oh, he's doing this technical thing that I don't quite get. He was programming back when he was a student as well, but it was in languages that he keeps mentioning that I've never heard of, that I don't think exist anymore. And I'm pretty sure punch cards were the way you stored data at the time rather than hard drives. So not exactly comparable, but sort of gets the principle of it.
Yeah, so that's where you got it, I suppose, then, maybe.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I actually worry sometimes that I've turned into the parts of my dad. There's bits of your parents that you don't want to turn into and bits that you do.
Yeah.
My dad always had these like complex setups where if you want to change the volume on the TV, you'd have to use like this other remote and you have to like turn this other system on. And he had like wireless music in the house well before the technology was there to back it up, and it just didn't work. And he'd be like, oh, if you want to listen to something from an MP3, it's really easy. All you do is you move this box out, you take this lead out, you put it in there, and then it plays anywhere in there. And I was like, Dad, this is so complicated. This isn't what technology is for. And now people come around to my house, they're like, how do I change the volume on your TV? I'm like, it's super easy. All you need to do is go around the back, move this wire. Dad's an engineer, so I was quite lucky like that. And Mum's just like very supportive, just sort of, it's the cool thing that he's doing. But they did sort of try and nudge me into the college thing. So I went to do this art course and it just didn't work out. So I left, didn't do that anymore. And that was the bit where it sort of became a job very quickly. I got lucky. There was a jokes website called Weeble Stuff, which people of a certain generation will have all heard of, and it had little cartoons on it. Yeah. And the dude that runs that, I ended up talking to him. I forget why. For some reason, I'd had joke websites. He was further ahead than me. He was a bit older than me. I ended up talking to him about something, and he'd mentioned that he was going to put adverts on his website. And then a few months later, he needed people to advertise on his website so he could sort of gauge how popular those adverts would be, so he could work out how much to charge for it. But he was well undercharging at first for what these adverts were getting in terms of hits and click-throughs. I had a hosting company at the time. I'd needed web hosting for these websites I've been doing. Like I'd done one for the guy from school who did the computers, did one for a local limousine company. My mum drove me to the meeting and I wore a suit and everything. And this guy was like, it's a limousine company, son, you don't need to do this. Yeah, style limousines. What a dreamer. That guy thought he was buying... There was a limo that someone made in the States that was the body of a Learjet that they put wheels on. And it made jet noises. And his website was all about the fact he was buying one. And at the time, I was like, this guy, wow, he's buying and you look back and you're like, he was just a dreamer. That's brilliant. He was like, if I make the website, then I'll get it.
So he didn't follow through?
Not on the jet one, but he was the first person in Manchester to have like Hummer limousines and stuff, which when you're making websites for someone and you're like 16, you're like, oh, that's impressive. Now you look at Hummer limousines, you're like, oh, maybe stay away from that one.
That's like cool back then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Ignition Remix was massive. So, everyone was into that. So I've been doing those websites and went on this college course, left, got some adverts from the Weeble Stuff guy for like virtually no money at all. Enough money that I just paid for it out of my my little couple of £100 website fees. And I had a hosting company. What I'd noticed when I'd needed to buy hosting for these people was that it was always like this packaged up hosting that you got at the time on shared hosting. You had to get, there's like co-located servers, which are dead expensive, or you got hosting that was like a certain amount of storage, certain amount of bandwidth or whatever. And it was a certain price, but not everyone needed that combination. So I just bought a huge reseller package from a company in the States, made a website where you could use these little, this is the start of the interaction designer in me, I think. You could use these things to drag up and down, which is pointless because everyone can type numbers. These drag things just make it harder, if anything, but you could drag them up and down anyway. And fill in how much bandwidth and how much storage you needed. You didn't have to, and it gave you a price. So it's good. Like I had some architects who were like, well, we have huge files, but they only get downloaded like 2 or 3 times. And there's some people like, I have a tiny website that gets millions of hits. People needed that. Advertised my hosting company on this guy's Weeble Stuff website, and all of a sudden just kept getting people coming through, like buying. It was all through PayPal as well. Super ropey. Just my PayPal account was just going like up and up and up. Not by an amount that's like would be worrying to me now, but as a professional or any adult, but as a sort of teenager, you suddenly see it going, you're like, oh shit, I've got to actually deal with this. So I ended up making my own servers on my own rack out of other people's servers. Didn't make the servers. Yeah. And had hosting running out of the garage of my parents with a uninterrupted power supply and
this is all just connection. I mean, how did you get your head around all this? I mean, is this...
Oh, I mean, I'm not saying it worked well.
What makes you think I can do that? I mean, it must be it's a certain mindset. I mean, not many people could think, right, okay, let's just give this a go. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
I think that's the difficult part. Once you go, let's give this a go, I think the rest of it gets kind of easy. Stack Overflow is really handy for stuff like this.
Yeah.
You can just sort of find the answer to you're generally not the first person to have a problem. So if you can Google it, you can find somebody else who's had the problem. Hopefully somebody brighter who's actually worked out the solution as well. Yeah. And then problem solved. But UPSs were sort of plug and play things.
Yeah.
And servers. I remember my dad sort of spotted it one day. He was like, he knows what a server rack looks like. I was a bit like, what's this? It's got an uninterrupted power supply. Why? So yeah, moved everyone off that into the back onto the shared hosting that I'd started with, or the reseller shared hosting. But yeah, had a hosting company. That was kind of the start of working in digital, I suppose.
Yeah. So how long did that go for then? I mean, what made you start?
Technically, I've not stopped. In that there's a handful of people who are the ones that I consider to be more like friends now, who I still host. I don't speak to them much because I'm on the other side of the world, but yeah, I do still have a very small version of that account running. Yeah. Because there were a few people who bought accounts who I just kind of liked. Eventually, I sold the customers to, not in a human trafficking way, I sold the customers in a, I was meant to sell the business. It was going to get what you would now, I guess, call acquired. I don't know if you can use that word honestly for this, but there was a hosting company that kind of wanted to grow, and they were doing it by buying other people's customers off them or buying their companies. My company was the accounts were just my PayPal account. There was no accounts. There was no way to tell. The support was I had a SIP system, so like you called into it on one landline number, which was a London number, because I thought, oh, that's more professional.
Yeah.
Which is stupid. I'm so like what's the word? Patriotic as a Mancunian now, but at the time, so I had a SIP number, and like that would redirect to either me, or I had other friends who did this sort of stuff who were like on call for me. So like there was 24-hour coverage for support. Thank God no one called in the middle of the night, because it was just a bunch of people who were actually in bed. But yeah, sold those on. So that was probably a couple of years, two years.
The first startup built and sold.
Yeah, do you know what? I've just seen on my LinkedIn, I've actually listed it as I thought the job title is founder, which I'm going to say that's a bit of a con. Oh no! I mean, if you look at the description of founder, it fits in. It's fine. I was a founder.
Yeah. So I mean, had you always thought that you'd want to kind of build your own business? Did you always want to be your own boss, or was that just something that?
Yeah, I think so. I guess I've come to realize now that I quite like operationalizing things, which is like it's something you don't realize as a teenager. It's also something it's pretty hard to say someone in their 30s, to be honest. It doesn't sound very interesting at all. But I think there's like a creativity in being entrepreneurial that I quite enjoy. And it's something that you don't really get when you work in contract roles like I do now. Or, I mean, I still get it a bit because I have like side clients and I do bits of consultancy for people, and that's cool. But there is definitely like a creativity in entrepreneurialism that I think when you put that together with something that's sellable as a skill or a product, that's when things come together and you start with a business. I mean, I still do that. I still keep setting up websites for business ideas that I have now as like an overexcited. I go back to that same space in my head as when I was a teenager. Yeah. What was the last one? The last one was a drones company. The drones laws in Australia are really complex. And I thought, I work in government, I can read through legislation and regulation, I can work it out. And I did, worked it out, looked at how much drones cost, thought I could do that. Looked at how much it costs to be a professional pilot cost, because you need the certificates, and thought, I can do that. Yeah. And then looked at how the building industry in America, and I think in the UK and Europe as well, is using drones a lot for sort of site surveys, and you can do a lot of technical stuff with drones. You can do 3D site surveys. You can do a sort of land survey when it's brownfield, or you can just send a drone up on an automated path every couple of weeks to see the building from the top, and you can actually put the plans on top of it, make sure everything's right. Looked at all of that and thought, I'll start a drones company. And then you do I did the website and like even got some of the licenses and stuff. And then thought, why would I do that? Why I've got a career that I'm kind of busy. Kind of do something already.
Funny you say drones, obviously living out on a farm here in New Zealand at the moment, they actually use drones for herding sheep, and they fly, they have a barking that comes out of the drone.
That's amazing.
They work together to collect the sheep rather than having the sheep.
Yes, you didn't even know that one. There's so like crop dusting, that can be drones.
Yeah, there you go.
Everyone's seen the picture of well, not everyone, but anyone who's looked into drones has seen the picture of a drone with a flamethrower on it, which was, I think it was the electricity company, the main electricity company in China, I think it was. They put a flamethrower on a drone so they could burn things off electricity pylons without having to go up there and risk somebody's life getting electrocuted.
Yeah, add that to Robot Wars. Remember that?
Yes, I used to love that. I always wanted to be on it. I actually watched it recently with a mate of mine who's another Jordan. He's another government digital person who was just a sort of teenager geek who ended up doing this stuff. So obviously he was into Robot Wars as well. When you look back at it though, you look at the robots, and at the time you were like, this is some amazing big thing. Like you could drive this thing around the shops. But then you look at it now, and it was like an electric wheelchair motor in a metal box with a hammer on the front of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and just some geeky dude who's like, yeah, this is my robot, isn't it brilliant?
So how many websites do you think you have live at the moment? Different ideas that are flying around, still floating.
I dread to think. I get emailed most days from domain name companies saying, we've just renewed this domain name for you. I'm like, oh yeah. About that. Yeah. I never go through with any of it. I like the enjoyment of coming up with the idea, and I actually enjoy operationalizing it a bit and saying, well, this is the system I can use to automate this part of the work, or I should really just link up with people who actually have these companies and say, I think I can automate some of your work and take it away from you in a good way. But I don't. So yeah, God knows how many. Probably still got a hosting company website live somewhere.
likely. So you went to college, you did this art course, which obviously wasn't for you.
Yeah.
What was the next step from there? Did you go to university?
No, never went. No. I've looked into going.
Yeah.
No one asked about this. It's not on my CV or anything like that. It doesn't say, there's no section for education. Because if you have a section for education and put, I went to high school, people are like, come off it, son. What do you mean you went to high school? That's not worth putting.
Got a couple of D's in my GCSEs.
Yeah, let me tell you about my technology D, because it was a real turnaround. So I just don't have an education section. No one questions it. Once you've been working for a while, no one questions it.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, it's becoming less and less these days. I mean, you'd be surprised. I mean, still, I still see it where companies say we want to see a degree or some kind of educational certificate in some way.
Yeah.
But I reckon, I mean, just in the last few years, that's gone downhill quite a lot. I mean, we probably get maybe 5% of clients asking for that. It's very, very. Yeah.
I'm glad it's going that way. I thought it'd gone the other way. I'm speaking from a position of privilege, because I got into this before there were degrees that existed in it. I got into it when it was like the Wild West. It was people hacking around. Yeah. So I don't know if you could do that now. And sometimes over the years, I've had people come to me and say, oh, can you speak to my nephew or my son or my daughter or whatever? And he's not really academic, but is smart. And, I guess they detect that in me. But they don't really want to go to uni and stuff, but they're quite technical or they're quite creative, and they want to, and I'm always a bit like, oh, I don't know what to say, because all I can say is, well, if this was 20 years ago, you'd be much better off, because there weren't degrees that existed and you could just sort of hack around. But now people are very well trained. That said, this goes back to the people seeing specialisms as being interacting with each other when they don't have to. Mm-hmm. Most people who do degree, they do it in whatever. If you've got a degree in, I don't want to, everyone picks sports science as the thing that people do that they don't end up using for a job. I feel really bad, because some people do genuinely. You've got a degree in falconry, then you go and do a course that takes 6 months or 3 months to become a UXer. You can be a good UXer. You can be I don't know the word, but a falcon handler. You can do birds of prey and UX, and the two don't take away from each other. So I guess that's the benefit of where we are as an industry.
Yeah. So did you never have the want to go to university, or you just had other things going on in your life and you just thought, right, I'll just crack on with this?
Yeah, I just thought I'd crack on. I think I see myself more as a lot of people in UX talk about the sort of academic side of it, or like the high end side of it. The amount of posts on LinkedIn where people are comparing the UX that they're doing to people die if the controls of a plane don't work properly. And it's like, right, just so you know, people who went on the quick 6-week version of whichever trading company's UX course and have since made a handful of digital products are not the people that get into design cockpits on planes. There are very well qualified people with PhDs in human computer interaction who design cockpits on planes. It's not quite the same job.
No.
But I appreciate the grandeur of it. I think the academic side sort of never appealed to me. I see myself more as like basically a tradie, but my trade involves sitting at a keyboard. But yeah, I'm very much like a sort of, if there was an apprenticeship or than that, I'm that kind of person, I think.
Hands-on. Yeah. So what was your next step in life then from there?
Next step. So at the time, I'd got a side job at John Lewis, which for the.
So how old are you here, by the way?
At this point, I'm like 17.
Yeah, cool.
Because I finished school at 16. Did what everyone does in the summer holidays after school. Started a hosting company, and then I'd been working at John Lewis, which I lived around the corner from a John Lewis, which was like one of the first ones up north, because it's a very backwards place. I went up to my hours there. I was working on computers, and again, like really supportive group of people. When I think back, it was just all these like middle-aged blokes and women who were selling computers and TVs to people. And this kid had turned up who was just this geeky, probably really annoying kid, who was like super keen, but they all supported it. They were really nice. So yeah, I did like whichever shifts I could get so I could sort of justify the fact I'd left college to be self-employed, because self-employment was and always will be inconsistent and difficult. So I was working at John Lewis. I would go out for the TV installers used to teach me to drive in the John Lewis vans. I shouldn't say that. They'll probably retrospectively get in trouble for that. So yeah, I used to like practice driving when I was before I did my tests in John Lewis vans, and was doing that, and then that led on to something else, which is God. This whole story is a story of me being in the right place at the right time and just being very fortunate.
That's life. I mean, that's how you get through life. It's often.
Yeah, I suppose, but I mean, didn't earn any of it. So the job I went for after that was, I saw an advert that they were looking for customer experience people for Canon, the camera company, and it was this company that does customer experience retail design. And I went to them, and what I thought was that you used to have these people that would come around the shops, and they would be like the rep and they weren't like a proper rep. They didn't have a free car. They were more like they were sort of like day rate staff who they would come into a shop, and it was their job to sell stuff in that shop, but only if it was a certain brand, and the brand paid for them. I thought it was one of those jobs, and they were quite cool because you got to work for cool companies and you got to travel around and stuff. So I applied for that and went into this company, and realized that it was not that job at all. It was actually like designing shops and designing retail experiences. I missed a step in my chronology because it was years ago. I'd actually, in the meantime, there's a middle bit here that I've missed. I'm going to Star Wars this and go backwards a bit in the story. Was John Lewis for a while. I left John Lewis to go and work for a web development company.
Yeah,
I thought this happened the other way around, but it didn't. I left John Lewis to go and work for a web development company in Macclesfield, which is where my parents pretty much live now. It's in Cheshire, just outside of Manchester. It's the kind of place that has lots of closed down mills, and people wearing gilets and Range Rovers, driving Range Rovers. So went to Macclesfield to the web development company. The guy that owned it, I still speak to him every now and again, quite rarely, but he's a really good dude. His name's Tom. And he took a risk, I'd say. He was a small web design company making websites for small, medium businesses mostly, and a couple of big ones. So they made the Subway UK website, which was for a lot of web design company in Cheshire, quite a big deal. Like this big international company, like, can you make our UK website? That was cool. And there's a few things like that. Did a few big ones, but then the sort of cash flow was from these small, medium businesses. I'd done a bit of PHP, done a bit of web development, and fancied being a professional web developer, and got a job with him. He took a risk and gave me a job as a 17 or 18-year-old, probably 18-year-old, to be a web developer for his company.
Crazy.
Really small team.
How did you sell it? I mean, how did you get the job?
I think he just maybe saw something in me that he liked, that maybe he recognized being what he's like as well. Yeah, and I wasn't the only one. The whole team was a bit of a motley crew, really. Like, it was a bunch of local guys who'd got into web stuff but might not have been from the traditional computer science background or anything like that. So there's a few of us. There's only a small company. It was me. So the development team was me and a guy called Brett, who was the lead developer. He'd been doing development for years. But again, he was like a local guy who was mostly just into motorbikes and stuff. Web development was like this job that he'd stumbled across. The designer was a guy called Alex, who, similar thing, like he'd spent his wages on airsoft stuff and like his car, and sort of fallen into, he was a graphic designer who'd fallen into web. I was this like child who'd just come into their company to help them out. He had a sales guy called Adrian who had no background in web stuff. He'd found the job through the job center, and it just worked out. He was the sales dude, and he did a good job of that. And Tom was running the place, which must have been really stressful to get all these people who don't fully know the craft and try and sort of hone them into a working web company.
That's probably why it worked.
Yeah, probably. He did a really good job. It worked. So I'd gone there. to be a professional web developer. Then I moved on from there far too soon. I think at the time I was a bit cocky and didn't appreciate the chance I'd been given to work there. Moved on a bit too soon to this company that was, I got put in touch with. It was like a old client put me in touch with them. That was a media company in Stockport, which sounded so exotic at the time, but when I say it now, it sounds a bit depressing. On an industrial estate, really great. So I went over there and was a web developer, and that just didn't work out. I just didn't enjoy it. I was there for 5 months, according to LinkedIn. So there was a couple of good people there, but it was a media company. It was an advertising company. I was doing websites. It wasn't the guy I worked with who did web stuff. He was good. Don't think he was hugely impressed by how inexperienced I was at first, but I think he got to like me, and I definitely got to like him. So it worked out. Being endearing will get you very far. So that happened in the middle, and I left there and was freelancing again. And that's the point at which I was like I had retail before, I now need something else I can do, because just freelancing is inconsistent. And I think it's healthy not to trust it, and especially when you're young and you can work 2 jobs at the same time, it's pretty healthy to try and get an income. I've got a friend who's a speaker, motivational speaker, who says that if you have a plan B, then your plan A is not going to work. But I think having a plan B is probably a pragmatic thing to do. So I went for this job with Canon, and it wasn't with Canon at all. It was with this company that did retail experiences, and they sort of gave me the job because I'd done web stuff, and I've been doing web stuff for years by this point. Some time has passed. I mean, doing a lot of web stuff. I'd done the early versions of UX in bigger teams as well, as a freelancer, and I'd also done a bit of retail stuff. And I think they just, again, this company just somehow trusted me to do stuff. And instead of putting me on Canon cameras, they put me on this Ferrari campaign, which was for Acer laptops and other consumer electronics that were Ferrari branded. And we had to design what would a Ferrari sales experience look like, because they wanted to sell this consumer electronics stuff in Ferrari dealerships. Which is like a completely different world. I find myself stood in these Ferrari dealerships around the UK, like, how the hell did I get here? What is
how did you get your mind in the game for something like that? I mean, surely it's stuff that you've never done before. I mean, did you just literally like, right?
I was a trainee. I was under the supervision of other people who were teaching me how to do what I now know is user research. But for them, they didn't use the phrase user research because it wasn't user based. It was retail. Got to learn about all the sort of the stuff that Gruen had come up with in retail and all the psychology of it. And we're doing user research, and they were just sort of showing me the process of how you look at what someone does and turn that into a solution. I had no idea that this would come together with my digital stuff later on to become like a whole career. That was where I'd learned the customer experience.
Was that research process back then similar to what you are doing now, would you say?
It was similar, yeah. And that's where I think in digital UX, what we can do a lot is think that we are the people that I don't think anyone is arrogant enough to think we came up with the whole research thing, but I think there's a lot of people who maybe think that we're the ones who made this a big thing, but it's been around for years. Marketing we make fun of market research sometimes and say it's not like user research and has closed questions or it's just about checking boxes. But marketing people have been doing good research for years. Product people have been doing good research for years. You kind of can't have it both ways. We like to say that we are, or at least think that we were maybe the people that pioneered it. But then if I hear that Henry Ford quote that everyone throws around one more time, I'm going to go mad. And that was decades ago. So you got to say, well, either the Henry Ford quote doesn't count for user research, which would be great because it would mean it got used less, or we didn't pioneer it, or the other way around. So yeah, that was where the research stuff came around. It was interesting, but I mean, God knows how I ended up doing that. Luckily, that company also did stuff for tech companies. So that's where I got a bit more into. It was like that tech thing. I was back in tech.
Yeah. So how long were you there for?
I don't know. I didn't work for them full time. There was a few companies that did that sort of stuff. And once you got to know the teams, they would, the same person that I did the Ferrari stuff, that Ferrari Acer stuff with, we went and did an Acer. We did Ferrari Acer first, then just Acer. And then they took me with them on a couple of projects. And then you meet other people and go on other projects with them. And I ended up working on a campaign to design what is now the Apple Store, but at the time, Apple didn't have retail outlets. So the scope of the job was to work with Apple to work out what form of retail was going to work for them, whether it was having their own shop or something they called store in store at the time, or whether it was something else completely, like a new type of retail. So we were doing the prototyping for those big benches that, I mean, those ideas came from California. We can't take credit for that. But there was research that we did that fed into what is now the Apple Store. So the whole thing.
Amazing project had been on.
And what year was this? 2008 and 2009. Like it wasn't. I mean, I wasn't very old. I was still sort of learning the trade. So I mean, it's like you say, it's like an entirely different career. Like designing shops is something you just don't think of as being the same thing as designing software and websites. But
I suppose the whole design process is similar.
Yeah, surprisingly similar. Yeah. It's all about looking at people and working out, and also committing as little resources as possible to a version that you can test in as realistic a scenario as possible.
Yeah. So what was your next step from there?
LinkedIn will tell me. Oh,
you're going through LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm using my LinkedIn to work out what I've done in my life. I don't remember this stuff.
Do you know, it's hard. It's hard because when Chris and I did ours, and I had to think about my life and how it's all panned out. I mean, I really had to write time.
Yeah.
Certainly kind of crossroads in your life that you completely forgotten about.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Very interesting to look back.
Luckily,
at it.
Mine's all work-based, so I can just do it off LinkedIn.
Oh, you must have some other great parts of your life that isn't work-based.
Oh, there is some stuff. I mean, it's almost work-based as well. One of the stupid things, and people at work are always like, "Is that a real thing?" I've done random shifts as a bouncer because I'm 6 foot tall, broad, and I mean, I wasn't even tattooed at the time, but I am now, and that just looks about right on it as a bouncer. As soon as I speak, it's kind of obvious that this play isn't a great. Like he's not going to stop any fights.
Is this in Stockport?
No, this was just around Manchester. It was never permanent or proper. I just sort of stood in as and when I needed to. It turns out it only takes 2 days to do the course to get the badge. So
yeah, I've got a few friends that do it in Manchester, and they did a similar thing. You can make quite a lot of money.
Yeah, especially if you're, because the person who stands on the door who checks that you're on the right list or whatever at the fancy places, is technically a bouncer, but they need to be able to put a full sentence together, and a lot of bouncers don't want to do that. Not that they can't. It's just that the people that become bouncers aren't often people that, from my experience, particularly want to work with the public.
What kind of venues were you working at?
It kind of varied because it was never the same one twice, to be honest. But one night I ended up standing in only for a few hours at the press club, which is like that was a double cool thing because it was a really cool place to go and it's quite exclusive. There'd always be people from like Coronation Street and Hollyoaks and stuff in the press club. So it's a cool place. but also it was where my granddad, when he was a printer in Manchester, when he'd finished work, they'd finish work at like 4 or 5 a.m. And they'd all go there and have a few beers after work, like anyone else would, having a few beers after work. You know, it's what you do after work in a lot of workplaces. But for them, it was like in the morning. So everyone's sort of going into work at 7 a.m. with the briefcases, and they're all sort of tipsy coming out of the press club. But yeah, so that was cool. That was a bit of shared history with my granddad, which is nice. Did I what? Sorry?
Did you have to split some
trouble. No, this might shock you, but I'm not a fighter.
But sometimes as a really my you've got to split stuff up. That's the thing. I mean, you've got to get involved sometimes if there's a bit of trouble.
What I found, yeah, I think doormen who've seen a lot of action might suggest this is bullshit, but I think what I found was that if you look enough like you should be the bouncer, and you've got that badge on your arm with the high vis holder thing, when you walk towards two people who are squaring up to each other, they go, "Oh shit, the bouncer's here. If we don't stop this, then we'll get battered."
Yeah.
They don't spend enough time looking at the bouncer to go, "It's a chubby kid." Like, it doesn't sort of sink into them that like they're winning that fight.
You must have had that.
And there's sort of,
you must have had that presence still.
I think the badge has the presence rather than the person. Some of the scariest bouncers I think I knew were people who were, you know, men, women who were sub 5'7" and out for blood. I was taller, but not out for blood.
How old are you?
So that was that happened later on when I'd gone back to self-employment, I think.
Yeah.
That wasn't really chronological. That was just an aside where to lead into the fact that the next job, the last question of what happened next, was I actually went to be a lecturer on the course that I'd quit at college, which started a few years of just doing random strange jobs and sort of freelancing again.
Yeah.
So I was part-time lecturer on the course that I'd quit because it become more technical in the meantime. And there's all these art students that had to learn web stuff. And maybe some of them work in it now. I don't know. I didn't keep in touch with them. But for a year, I was a part-time lecturer at a college, South Trafford College in Manchester, which is like it's a vocational college. So that was a college I'd been to. Really good. They had some really forward-thinking courses. I think the people that are in charge of what courses they do, we're talking about teachers before and how teachers have to predict what's next. I think they were doing a really good job of that. As vocational places tend to do, they have to. So yeah, I went and taught some courses there for a bit, taught some art students how to do tech. And that was because that was part-time. That was just the time that I was doing all this like other stuff on the side. And I got sent to Ibiza for on and off over a few months. For a whole season I was there on and off, filming videos for people, because this dude that I'd done a website 4 years ago, when I did the website for him, he sort of went, "Can you hold a camera?" And I was like, yeah, sure. And one of his camera operators for a wedding he was doing the next day, his main clients were rich Jewish families. So we're talking like massive Jewish weddings, which I don't know if you've been to Jewish weddings. I hadn't until that point, but they are hectic. They're massive, and like it really goes off. So he filmed it going off. So he did those. He did like bar mitzvahs as well. People will spend like tens of thousands of pounds on a bar mitzvah for their kids in Manchester sometimes. And again, hectic, goes off. Suddenly realize, having grown up, you know, not Jewish, that if you're choosing your culture and you want there to be like regular big parties that you get to go to, that's probably the one for you. They really get down to it. So we're filming these like amazing like events, bar mitzvahs and weddings and stuff, and all of the, it's almost like one-upmanship. How mad can we make my kid's bar mitzvah because his school classes, school friends bar mitzvah are all mad. I've been filming stuff for him, and then some work came up where we went to Ibiza a couple of times, filmed some DJs and filmed a music video, which I went to look at again a couple of years ago, and it was bloody awful, really bad. Not surprising, really. So yeah, that was a few years of just doing. I've gone completely off track for anyone who's interested in creative careers now, because this is just stuff where I've just been talking to people and doing any job I could be.
Well, that's fine, because it's stuff that's led you to where you are, mate. So it's good to hear. I bet that was fun going back and forth to Ibiza.
Yeah, it was good. It's a pretty good job to do. Yeah, a couple of times.
I enjoyed that.
Yeah, but it goes back on track after that. That's when I got into UX after that. So that's where the sort of UX that we now know came into play. So I'd done this retail stuff years ago, done the user research stuff. I'd been working this whole time. I'm making websites and doing technology stuff on the side and developing stuff and getting more and more into the front end. Eventually being more like a front end developer, and then realizing that the reason I do front end development is to do UX. And then that's when I started to take it more seriously, I suppose. So what was that? 12 years ago.
Yeah.
That's when it started properly. I actually got into like proper UX and stuff.
Good man. And so you've obviously been in Australia for quite a while.
Yeah.
What was the kind of lead up then to kind of leaving the UK and moving out here?
Yeah. It was my ex's idea. We moved out here together, but it just didn't work out that she came with me.
Did you not? She didn't actually come with you in the end?
No. Talk
to me about your ex. How did you meet?
It's like a psychology session.
Well, come on. This got you to Australia, which is a huge part of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I really should thank her for that.
You should.
Yeah, I mean, it's her idea. She'd always wanted to do it, and I'd kind of thought about it, but never thought I'd actually do it. I thought maybe I'll do it if the time's right or whatever. If something happens that makes me think that's what I want to do. But things were going quite well. By this point, I'd done a few UX contracts. I'd really got into UX. I've been working at the Home Office in the UK as an interaction designer, and the person who's in charge of digital data and technology, I think it's called now, but basically head of user research and design, had sort of taken a chance on me and given me a role leading the sort of tooling and technology for designers, which was, again, a lot of my UX jobs I've ended up getting to design ops.
Yeah.
So things were going quite well. Done a few contracts. I'd ended up working for a big consultancy in a job where I was getting sent to other countries to work for a couple of months at a time. So I'd done like the USA, India, through different jobs. I'd been to the USA for work a couple of times, and I was really enjoying that, and went to India. And then that just like all big consultancy projects, one day it's working well, the next day it's like the client hates us now and we're all off.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd sort of been looking around at jobs. There was a couple of jobs going in government. It was a really cool job going in a team at Number 10 that was doing digital transformation stuff, and they needed a designer. So I'd sort of applied for that. And my ex was pushing this Australia thing and saying this is a good idea, now's a good time. So I was like, maybe we could then. And I'd applied for a job at an airline out here, and I'd had the interview and it had gone quite well. I'd woken up at some ungodly hours, had the interview. It had gone quite well, and they were happy for me to join when I arrived here, and they would wait. And then I think I got the phone call saying I'd got the job and did I want to take it. Something like 5 minutes after the news had been on that said, yeah, Brexit's definitely happening. Like, that's definitely a thing. And then David Cameron had come out, and that was the person who'd sort of suggested this team that I was going into that sounded really cool should exist. He came out and said, well, I'm out, I quit. Really? As Prime Minister. So I'm sort of looking at the Prime Minister that invented this team that I was hoping to go into, quitting. The country saying, we don't really like internationalization that much. We don't really, we're kind of moving away from that. Yeah. And I look at these two things, and then I get a phone call from Australia saying, do you want to come and do this job? It's like, yeah. Yes, that sounds great. That sounds like very good timing. Good time for me to.
Perfect timing. So had you been to Australia before?
Yeah. I've been here on holiday for a bit of an extended holiday, like a few weeks, where I brought my laptop with me and did a bit of work whilst I was here as well. Spent a bit of time driving from Adelaide to Melbourne.
So you knew what you're getting yourself in for.
Yeah, and it's quite nice as well here. So
it's not bad, is it?
Famous for it.
So had you always planned to move to Sydney?
No, I do get almost daily someone says to me, have you thought about living in Melbourne? Because I'm not into the beach. I've not been to the beach once since I moved here. It's just not my thing. It's just why we're all mostly naked with each other on the sand. It's not for me. I'm just a geeky kid.
Well, that's what all the Brits move to Sydney for that. That's the thing.
Yeah, I know. And do you know what? It's cool because Sydney's really good. Apart from the beach is great, but Sydney's got a lot going on for it that's not the beach.
It's very true. And people just see Sydney as the beach.
Yeah. Inner West is amazing. It's like we're almost writing off the Inner West as this really cool area. Loads of good stuff going on. Loads of creative stuff going on.
I mean, I definitely think Melbourne's your thing also. I mean, a great city to live in.
Like a giant Inner West, isn't it? That's the thing. That's the bit that makes everyone say you should just move to the city version of that. Plus, Manchester's a bit like that. It's quite a creative city. It's had to embrace street art and graffiti as a way of getting around horrible 1970s architecture as well as Melbourne. So some similarities there.
So your girlfriend at the time, then it was her idea to move to Oz. Yeah. And it just didn't work out at the time with her, and you moved separately, or did she still come over?
No, she didn't come over in the end. No. So I just moved here, and she had some good stuff going on in the UK, so she stayed there. I guess I should thank her for that. Really,
you should. So what was it like then? Your first year landing in Sydney. So you had a job obviously ready for you when you arrived. Yeah,
did you work out that job? To be honest, it was
didn't work out.
No. It was an interesting one. What I've since learned is that design ops activities are part of being a senior UXer more in the UK than they are in Sydney. Sydney's UX is different. I think I wrote this on a comment on something that you posted, but it's grown differently. It's not worse off for it or better off for it. It's just different. I think I wasn't here at the time, so I can't really say, but I think maybe there was a bit of a delayed onset with UX. And by the time it arrived, it was almost like it got to skip that step where people didn't really know what it was. Yeah. And by the time the training arrived and by the time people knew what it was like GA has landed and we can all train in this thing now. Yeah. So I think it grew super fast from what I've heard from people who were around at the time. And because of that, it's just slightly different. You've got a lot of practitioners with a similar skill set. So it's become a bit more specific. Whereas in the places where it grew more organically, it was probably lots of people like me who were kind of hackers at this and that, and people who'd maybe been sort of lost in web development, thinking that was what they did because they like making stuff. And then they find out maybe some people from like psychology or human computer interaction are coming as well. And it's when you put all these people together, you get this sort of organic blob of skills. It's just a bit different here. So I didn't realize that at the time. So I started this job at this airline. And when I got there, it was the process that I'd come to know as the old process. It was, product manager goes to designer uses Sketch to come up with like a flat design. That flat design gets passed to developers who make it. And I'm sort of going, well, this is weird. Where's the design system in this? And there was a design system. It just was separated between tech and designers. And I was like, where's the user research? Like, I'm not saying we have to do like formative user research for every single bit of change we make to the website, but where's the usability testing with the flat designs, at least, so that we can make sure it does the right thing before we commit to developing it? Or where's the quick development version so we can commit to it working before we do the difficult, time-consuming development version? So I just started working on that stuff. I just started working on things that I'd seen in big design teams that I'd been in that was good. I set up a Slack channel for that airline's design function, which was lots of people. I set up a guild. I literally went onto LinkedIn and searched for anyone who worked there, who worked in UX or design, and set up a guild and just invited them on LinkedIn. I was like, hey, we work together, but we don't know each other. I set up a guild. We're having a meetup in this part of the office in this lunchtime. Started going to the airport to do user research because we could get into their lounges and we could just sort of, people were sort of trapped there. It's like, we know you're waiting for 2 hours, so you can spend half an hour talking to us about this. With points on the website.
Oh, brilliant.
So I set up quite a few things that I was quite proud of at the time. And then
were you given the freedom to go with it?
Well, I felt like I was doing my job by doing that. So I was still, but I was doing it differently. I wasn't coming up with the same sort of number of flat designs because it's just not how I worked. I didn't really work in Sketch. It wasn't, for me, I'm designing an interface. So let's design the interface, not sort of a picture of it. So it's a good question to ask, because what happened was when I went on holiday, I got an email saying, don't come back. It's not, this isn't really working out. The recruiter was incredibly polite about the whole thing. Really dealt with it incredibly well. And yes, they sort of emailed him and said, he's not doing, I forgot what the wording was, but it was basically like, what we call UX work isn't what he's doing. And they weren't wrong. Like, I wasn't doing what they call UX work. I was trying to operationalize and make more efficient the UX process. And I wasn't in the position to do that. I wasn't asked to do that. It was a cock up from me. I definitely spent too much time doing what, it was almost like sort of arrogance, like, oh, I know what you need really. So yeah, definitely learned a couple of things from that. Learned that even if you think you're helping, even if you know you're helping, even if you've worked in bigger teams that work better or work more efficiently or whatever, and you can see what can be changed to improve things, you really got to be invited to do that. You can't just help. You can't just change things that it's not your job. People don't like that.
So how was it for you finding a job after that? Because I presume they sponsored you.
No, I came over when I was 29, so I was just young enough that I got a working holiday visa.
Okay. So it was just an initial contract, was it?
Yes. So I got here just in time to go on a working holiday visa. So I had a bit of freedom. I'd saved up some money whilst I was working there, and I got to sort of spend a few weeks looking for something else, and something did come up. I'd done a talk a few weeks earlier. It was the first enterprise UX meetup, which is now quite a frequent meetup. It gets quite a good crowd, so it's nice to have spoken at the first one. And one of the other speakers there was Ash from Tobias, or Tobias and Tobias as they were known then. And they had a project coming up with the government and they needed a service designer. So I was in a sort of fortunate position where it was only a couple of weeks before that sort of worked out. So I was back in the workforce quite quickly.
So did you
being let? I've not really been let go before, which I realize is a position of huge privilege. But it does set you back, especially when. Well, I thought I was helping, right? So like it's that whole all of a sudden your confidence is completely knocked. It's like and I think maybe having not been pushed back on that stuff before is possibly the reason that I was what I now see as a bit arrogant about helping. It was like, oh, I can help you fix, because I'd done that at the home office a bit. I'd sort of been prototyping and using HTML and different technologies to prototype. And when the head of user research and design had seen that, she'd sort of said, how can we make this more accessible for people who don't have those skills? And it was like I'd done the wrong thing because I thought I'd found something better. And she said, that's great. Let's see if we can build this out. And that happened a few times. Same with when I was at the consultancy. I'd, working with management consultants, they don't work like me. I'd sort of go into the room and be like, oh, I was thinking we could do it this way. Or we do this weird thing, or we can actually get a developer in. And they sort of go, sounds weird, but fine. Okay. Sounds like the kind of thing the client would like. So I think maybe that'd give me like a false sense of confidence about just changing people's processes. And that's where so it knocks you back. It makes you realize probably.
Is that changed your mindset going forward now, and how you manage stuff?
Yeah, definitely a bit more careful now about being invited to do things. I'm lucky now because I'm in more senior positions, and I've also found that design ops is now its own job, and you get a design ops job, and now that's more like what I'm doing. I've kind of found the bits that I need to be invited to do to enjoy myself. So now it probably wouldn't happen as much anymore because I'm not going into jobs where I'm going to do it differently. I'm going into jobs where I'm invited to do it differently.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a bit luckier.
So this next job, was that more aligned to your overall process and way of working?
Probably not. I'm not really a service designer.
No.
And that's another thing that I didn't realize was different. In the UK government, which is where I'd come across service design before, service design means designing services. It's like we're going to put a service live. The difference between service design and product design is that product is, the website part, and service design is the whole end-to-end, so end-to-end, front to back. And there's some really good blog posts by Lou Down, who was head of design for a while at gov.uk or GDS. And they've written some really good blog posts about what a service is and what a product is and how the two compare. But yeah, I'd come across that, so I thought I can do that. And then I realized that service design outside of the UK government, which obviously covers all of Australia and most of the jobs in the UK as well, is more of a consultancy type process of doing user research and stuff, but doing it alongside business people and doing it slightly differently. It's not so much delivery focused, like we're delivering a service, go and design it. It's more about like the double diamond never came up in UK government. It wasn't a thing that was ever spoken about, except the occasional sort of joke that we're not doing double diamonds. And then when you sort of walk into service design teams, a lot of time we've got double diamonds on the wall. At first I'd walk in and be like, oh, right, this is a serious thing, okay. And it's not to say that double diamond's wrong. It's a really good process. It's just not the kind of design that I'd sort of focused on before. I'd focused on like very delivery focused. So that service design role was a chance to learn that, and I didn't do badly at it. I don't think they would say that. I don't think I would say that, but it kind of made me realize that I want to be in teams that make stuff. I want to be in teams that are like, we need to put this thing live. And that was exactly what that job, well, not that job, but that company, that agency, I think they see their job as getting people from going around in circles about ideas and stuff into, so what we're going to make then. But I think I'm the next step. I think I am so what we're going to make then, it's this, how are we going to make it? I think that's me. Yeah.
Just in terms of then arriving to Australia and how much has it kind of affected your life? How is your life different now you're in Oz? What I mean, do you have a partner now? You have a girlfriend?
Yeah. So I have an entire life here, which is nice. I still don't. Whilst I'm not sort of seeing this as like something that I'm doing just for now and it'll all stop suddenly, I'm also not averse to the idea of going back to the UK and seeing how it works differently and moving around a bit. I mean, one of the things that I'd like to do is work in the States again, because that was different to Australia and different to the UK. And I think experiencing the US, the UK, I'd like to experience more of Europe, but there's some logistical issues with that now. And Australia. I think they're also different, that you can really learn. They can really learn from each other. And I think the UK and US market are maybe a bit more in touch with each other than Australia is with either of them sometimes. So I'd like to be one of the many people who tries to sort of bridge that gap and form a bit of a link. And it's starting to happen now, especially since COVID, everything's gone a bit more remote friendly. So now a meetup used to be a Sydney meetup or a Melbourne meetup. Now it's a worldwide meetup. So, when I got into the design ops meetups, I got to know someone called Erica from PayPal, who is working in the States. And we just hung out on the phone for an hour, because you can now. That seems normal. That would happen if you were around the corner.
Yeah.
And, when I gave a talk recently at at a human-centered design meetup. I put it on LinkedIn, and I've got a lot of contacts in the UK, and they dialed in because it was 8 a.m. for them, and it kind of worked out all right. So there's a few people from the UK government there listening into that was evening time in Sydney. So I think that the worlds are going to come together a bit more. And I'm a linguist person.
I agree. I mean, COVID's changed everything. I mean, even though we seem quite far away from each other, and obviously everyone's just got used to kind of remote working, but it's actually connected us. Obviously, technology's connected us a lot more than it would normally. And I think it's a lot more collaborative and more inclusive across global regions than it's ever been.
Yeah. And also, we've really come on, like, in having watched Sydney for the last 5 years in UX and in tech, it's been amazing. When I arrived, I felt like it was slightly different to what I'd experienced before. I felt like it was kind of finding its feet still, even though it was mature by that point. I've seen it change over the years, and it's got a lot more delivery focused, I think. We've got a huge number of UXers who are all super keen, really good workforce that needs to be tapped internationally. I think as an industry that our people are almost ahead of the industry in terms of companies. Like, the kind of work that you get in Sydney isn't keeping up with how keen and how open-minded the actual UXers are. So that if that talent could be tapped internationally, if some of those big startups from the States, or some of the big organizations, or even the startups from the UK and Europe, because Germany's got an amazing startup scene. If our talent pool could be tapped by those companies, that could provide a really nice combination of forward-thinking companies and forward-thinking. I feel really mean on the companies of Sydney, but they're not individuals; they can't get offended. And this really good talent pool that we've got, that could be a really good combination.
I mean, I think that's already a thing, and I've seen that across clients in Australia and New Zealand. That a lot of the US are tapping up talent here because, especially New Zealand, actually, that the time difference from San Fran is only a few hours at time. So company, I mean, it's good and bad because companies over here are losing talent to maybe US or UK companies. However, they're getting that experience of working for a Google or a Microsoft or some kind of great kind of tech house, and bringing those experiences back to Australia and New Zealand, and still bringing in the money. They're not leaving the country, so there's still money coming into the country. So that's not bad.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's worked both ways, I think, with COVID, because obviously New Zealand and Australia have also received a lot of their old workers that have obviously left the country previously to go to America or the UK. They've all come back. So a lot of talent has actually come back. So they've gained that talent, but also lost the talent in a remote way. So it's worked both ways.
I suppose. Yeah. It's definitely. I mean, if there's one thing we've got going for us here, it's our talent pool.
No, 100%. So where are we now in your life here? So
in timeline.
So you're 2 jobs in Sydney.
I'm
kind of job. Who are you working for?
So I went from Tobias and Tobias straight into. I did a little contract with Vodafone. But I mean, it was like one of these tiny, like, we've had an idea, let's just get in a team for 6 weeks to try it out, which is cool that they're doing that. It's like nice that they've got that attitude. But then got back into government, and it's not, it doesn't sound exciting. Like, it's getting into government is not a fun prospect for most people. It doesn't sound like the kind of place you're going to do good work. There's definitely a thing that once you're in government, you realize how nice it feels to do the kind of work that you can do in government compared to once you've worked in government for any decent amount of time, it'd be difficult to go from that to helping people get personal loans or something. You just couldn't do it. So there is that side of it. But got back into government and got kind of lucky again. I was in a role where I was in like a tiny innovation team in Transport for New South Wales, and they've got their accelerator and everything. This was separate to that. This was like a little team of 4 people who, if there's ever any sort of wacky ideas of we want to do this thing or we want to get into this, or can we make trains fly? I don't know. It was just they sort of came to us as the innovation team and were like, is this the sort of thing, or can you work out how we can solve this problem?
Right.
There's a good dude over there who's still over there, who's I don't know him well enough to say this, but I don't think he'll mind it. Just basically a bit of a tech geek who's an exec over there. I think he's in charge of technology now or something. But he set this team up. We had a good director who was also a bit of a geek who's since left the technology industry to go and start up a brewery. So obviously had enough of that. Had a few good people above us, and we just had permission to do cool stuff.
Yeah, right.
So that's
you. That's you in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't have that thing that I like, which is we're going to launch this. It didn't have let's operationalize it. It was very
the ideas.
Yeah, it was very much like early ideas, and then they kind of didn't go anywhere. And if they did, like the accelerator came from that team, it ends up with a proper team who sort of take it forward and build it. It's almost like I'd rather be in there. But I mean, not for the accelerator, because that is a whole accelerator of that early stage stuff, like, very conceptual, very high level, not let's build this thing. Move from there onto into what is now called the Department of Customer Service, which is where I still am. I'm on my fourth job in the same place. Moved there and done some cool stuff. Worked on a thing called Rules as Code, which was good to work on as a thing, but also I got really lucky because at this point I'm kind of, I said I come out on a working holiday visa, and I ended up getting sponsored by one of those companies that sponsors contractors. And then you have to work on their payroll, but it's kind of stressful. Like you never feel settled when you're doing that, because you only get, I think it's like 6 weeks between contracts to find another contract and start. And one of the things that I'd found in, and I think this ties in with the Australian attitude to life compared to the British attitude to life. In the UK, you finish your contract. Don't let the recruiters know you finished your contract yet. Take a week, maybe take 2 weeks if you need some time off. Then on like a Wednesday, don't tell everyone, don't put it on LinkedIn. Just tell the handful of good recruiters that you know in Manchester and London that you're free. You have that pool of people that you trust, that sort of 5 or 6 people. Tell them by Friday you're at interviews, and at that interview on Friday, they're keen for you to accept the job there and then, so you can start on the Monday. And it's all a bit intense. Here I noticed when you don't have a contract, you go and speak to people and you book in to go and speak to them and have coffee in like a few days' time. And then in a few days' time, you have coffee. And then a few days' time more, they say, I've got a client that you might want to meet. And you go and meet that client. And it's kind of this like slow-paced schmoozing process that takes a couple of months. At first, I hated it. I was like, why is this not? I want to be intense. I want to. But then you sort of get used to it.
Your time off to do a bit of travel, enjoy yourself.
Chill out. You've not got a job at the moment. It's really good. Chill out. But it took a while to get used to that. So contracting when you're sponsored and you've got to get a job in 6 weeks can be a bit stressful. It was a bit. I never really felt settled. I didn't really.
Well, I suppose you. I mean, do you have to leave the country? Do you know after? I mean, after 3 months, I think if you haven't.
Yeah, I think maybe it's 3 months. I thought you had to. I think you have to secure something in 6 weeks or something, and you've got to be working within 3 months. Or there's some complex rules, but complex rules. There's 2 timelines. Very very complex regulation. There's some rules around it, but it's stressful. It's enough to not feel like you really live here. It's enough to feel like keep enough money for a plane ticket back home to one side, because that might be what you end up doing, and you end up living differently. You don't really move into places. You sort of rent furniture, and you don't really think about saving up. You never think about buying a house or even long-term renting. But I did a project for Department of Customer Service, which is called Rules as Code, where we created a system and this is sort of taking off in governments internationally, but very slowly, as governments can be. We created a software version of regulation and legislation. So you get a piece of legislation, it gets written by lawyers in the same way it was written hundreds of years ago. It gets written as text for other humans to read, for other lawyers to read. It's written in legal prose. It's super hard to understand for anyone who's not a lawyer. And and it gets put on the internet as a PDF, and you can download it. But it's not on the internet as actual data. It's on the internet as a PDF that a human can read and interpret.
Yeah.
Now, most software now, most legislation turns into software. People aren't reading it and then doing something. They're reading it, putting it into some sort of system, and the system keeps an eye on the compliance and the rules. So rules as code is this project we did where we said, let's just make that thing available as an API. Let's just make APIs of all of the laws. So every single bit of regulation and legislation can be turned into something that a computer can read it directly. So when the minister talks about this, he says, if it suddenly becomes illegal to sell cappuccinos on Fridays, which thank God it's not, because the riots would cost billions. If it's suddenly illegal to sell cappuccinos on a Friday, you would not be able to, on your till system or your point of sale system in a coffee shop, you wouldn't be able to press the cappuccino button on a Friday because it would just be linked into the rules and it would know, which I think is a really good, tangible example. Yeah. And apparently he thought of that himself as well, which is pretty cool when the ministers understands it enough that the example is who told you that example, and it's his own, which is cool. So Rules as Code was a really interesting project, and that was great. And the reason I got to do it was because one of the execs who was working at government at the time, Pia Andrews, was one of these people who's had a lot of faith in me. It was really good. She sort of trusted me with this. This was like one of her things, and she trusted me and another guy called Tim to do it together, and kind of handed it off to us and was like, this is the thing, like go and speak to the people in New Zealand who do it, because it already happened in New Zealand. She'd run a government department over there, or a team in a government department. So we got someone from New Zealand, Brenda, to come over and help us for a week as well to get us going. And I learned Python because that's the language you had to use. And we were such a small team that there was no one who wasn't a designer, there was no one who wasn't a developer, and there was no one who wasn't a BA and a product manager as well. It was like everyone was doing everything.
Yeah.
So I learned a bit of Python, and we did that. And I was very lucky that at this point, that project was got enough traction that I got a distinguished talent visa, so became permanent resident, which took that stress away as well, which was nice.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I know the feeling. I mean, just initially being sponsored myself, and all being a very temporary thing until you get that permanent residency or citizenship. It's hard to relax and feel like you're actually settled.
Yes, definitely.
I mean, you're very lucky with that, because a lot of people wait a long time for their PR. Yeah,
one of my friends was going through the same process at the same time, and it was just so stressful for her. And I felt really bad. I mean, it came through in 6 weeks, end to end, from application to being a permanent resident was 6 weeks. And I just got super lucky, and I definitely appreciate and realised that it was just luck.
So tell me a bit about what you're up to at the moment, and lead on to kind of where you see yourself maybe further down the line, and what you want to do in life going forward.
So at the moment, what's that?
There's a few questions involved in that, but
so the current stuff is like design system stuff, which is great for me because it's there's a few sides to it that just tick all the boxes. It's the team that I'm running a team at the moment, and it's half design, half engineering, which is perfect for me. I'm getting to code again, which is really cool, but because I'm a design system, I can't help but be design related and design linked. So, I mean, I'm almost like on a personal vendetta. Me and a bunch of other people are on like a personal vendetta to really insist that separating engineering and design more is bad. They need to be closer. UX is the design part of an engineering function, which is software and websites and digital. So we're an engineering world, and we are the design function within an engineering world. But I think maybe people who've come from a different world, if people have come from graphic design and gone into UX, it might feel like the engineering is the technical part of a creative world, and it's just not where we are. The things that we make aren't creative enterprises; they're technical enterprises. And so, doing a design system for me is great because I can kind of bring those things together a bit more. And that's where design ops is really working out. So yeah, I've got a team of designers and developers who are really helping, doing a great job. And I guess I'm just getting out there and talking about that sort of stuff more. So I've got a talk coming up at the Design Ops Global Conference, which is in June. And talking of things being internationalized, it's a UK-based conference. Pete Fossick runs it, who quite a lot of people will know.
Yeah, no, Pete. Yeah.
Well, not just Pete, it's David as well. But Pete's the guy that I knew that runs it, and I spoke to him. And then when we got on a call, I didn't realize this, but he's actually based in Stockport. So I'm sat in Sydney, where he used to live, and he's sat in Stockport, where I'm from. So that was interesting. Really drove home how internationalized we've become. That just happened. I'm giving a talk there, and Erica, who I mentioned earlier, is also giving a talk there. So me and her are going to be talking about similar stuff. We're both talking about her phrase, but she's gracefully allowed me to use it as much as I want as well. Design Ops 2.0. So what we're talking about is how do we turn, if we look at what design is, we're talking about user experience design mostly. Maybe not UX, the thing that we've come to know as the skill set that it is, but we're talking about creating good experiences and designing good experiences. Her and I share a view that to create a good experience, everything needs to be involved. You're an architect who gets all of the systems set up and gets all of the bits of software talking to each other. If they do a crap job and they pick things that don't talk to each other, then that's going to be a bad experience. It's not going to work very well. Your backend developer, if they do a bad job, also have a bad experience. Front-end developer can create a bad experience. The whole stack can create a bad experience. So really, when we're talking about user experience design, we're saying all those people are involved. And as designers, we need to inject good experience principles into what they do. A lot of people think that, and that's in an automated way, and people see that as taking work away from UXers and saying we don't need UXers, we don't need UI people. Developers will just have a design system that they just pull from, and it just works. We're actually saying the opposite. We're saying that UX people should have a say over the whole stack. They should be involved in the whole thing. And when they're doing that much work, they don't have time to do individual interfaces anymore. That kind of needs to be automated. They need to hand off like a schema that says, here's the order of things, and the user interface will just happen. So that's the kind of talks that me and her are giving at the Design Ops conference. And that's kind of what I'm focusing on now, trying to get government to that point. We've got thousands of, maybe a couple thousand, more hundreds of services in government that need to be digitized.
Yeah.
And these are just simple things. These are just little forms that people fill in all the time. If you go to a service in New South Wales, there's queues outside because of COVID, so you can't have too many people inside. But what it shows is that lots of people are still going to the government, to a brick and mortar place to get stuff done. And it's great that they have that option. If people want to do that, they should totally be able to do that. They shouldn't be forced into a digital channel, but they also shouldn't be forced into a non-digital channel. So we've got a lot of transformation work to do. So the design system really is about saying, there's lots of cool work going on with all of these things where people are doing like innovation work, and like, how can we change the way that people think about this, and how can we bring these different licenses together, or whatever it is. We want to help people do the kind of boring side of it. You need to apply for school meals for your kid, like that kind of thing. You need to apply for a license to run a company that collects garbage. It's really boring stuff that needs to be changed. And we want to create a design system where doing that process doesn't mean a huge product team of like 7 or 8 people with 3 types of designer going through a double diamond for 12 weeks to work out what the user interface is going to look like. Do user research to work out how to do it. Use the design system. It's pre-tested. Usability is done. Accessibility is done. Just completely automate that top layer, so we can launch more stuff, so we can do more stuff, so we can make people's lives easier. Yeah,
that's what it's all about.
Yeah, hopefully. It sounds really grand, doesn't it? Yeah.
So, I mean, I presume this isn't something you're going to be doing your whole life. I mean, have you got aspirations in terms of? I mean, look, you've always got ideas going on. You've talked about it throughout the last few hours. Do you think anything will be converted? Do you think you'll come up with something? Think, right, I'm going to start my own thing here, and I'm going to deliver this. Or is that not what you're after?
I'm not really sure. I think what I'd like to do is, one of the things I've been doing in my spare time recently is looking more into robotics, and both software robotics like RPA, robotic process automation, and actual robotics as well. I think as UXers, our industry is going to change around us, and it's our job to keep up. And I think the UXer of the future is going to design that end to end, and you've got to know the technology to make sure that the system or the process or the experience that you're designing is technically possible. You know, I think most people call it the IDEO model. I'm not sure if they invented it or if it's just they popularized it, but desirable, viable, feasible is the three things. If you want to be a UXer and you want to actually work out the feasibility of something technically, you kind of need to understand the technology behind it. So when you look at like Amazon, for example, the main experience of Amazon isn't the user interface that you use to click buy. It's all the stuff that happens in the back end. You know, that one click to buy button, that's not just a piece of user interface, it's not a button. There's a patent behind that. There's the business process, there's a security process, there's a privacy process. There's a risk and compliance process of what happens when somebody presses it by accident. You know, there's all these things you have to consider. I think the UXers of the future are going to have to consider that, plus how can we quickly get things out of warehouses into people's houses. And I think that's where I'm trying to keep up and just make myself a bit more future ready by learning the technologies that are going to come in the future. Yeah.
Well, look, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you. I know we're coming probably to the end of your time. I know you have a stand-up very soon.
Yeah.
So I'll leave you to it and just thank you for spending the time to go through your life. Really interesting, mate. It's great to hear.
Thank you. I got to remember things that I'd forgotten about.
No, I bet. Yeah, no, it's always an interesting task to actually go through your life and
totally
have a look at what you've achieved. Well, look, mate, we'll stop recording there, but really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
Cheers.